It is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. It's very, very difficult to not be a Muslim and do anything in Pakistan. And the hope and the dream is to have job creation for Catholics in Pakistan through this project. That's the dream. And then to be able to share some of that revenue with appropriate ecclesiastical projects. That's what I'm looking to do with that specific project.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Founders Podcast. I'm your host, Silas Maynor. At Catholic Founders, we believe that entrepreneurship in its truest form is a divine calling, meaning that only Christians can fully enter into what it means to be an entrepreneur, at least to the fullest extent that's truly possible. And that's what we explore on this podcast, as well as with our Tuesday Saintly CEO newsletter. If you haven't checked that out, please do so. If this is your first time joining us here, thank you for tuning in. Today, we are talking about Catholic pink salt, specifically bath salt. Our guest is Eamonn Clark, and he is building a social entrepreneurship accelerator called the Christian Renaissance Movement. In essence, he's helping to start up social enterprises where the product will go to support local Catholics, mostly in places where Christianity is hard to practice. This way, they can support themselves as well as the ecclesiastic infrastructure in that area. And the first one that he's doing is with Catholics in Pakistan to help them sell this famous Himalayan pink salt, right? It's usually called Himalayan salt, even though it's actually a misnomer. But he explains that more in the episode. Since they are heavily persecuted living in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, it's nearly impossible for these Catholics, who are a very small minority, to feed their families, to have good employment, unless they have some very special connections where people kind of look the other way as they hire a Catholic. This is the way to do that. He does have other projects on the horizon, given that this is an accelerator, but this gives you a little bit of a taste of what Eamonn is all about and what they're doing with Catholic bath salts, which, well, we'll let him explain the rest in the episode. Before we do get into the episode, I do want a quick shout out to our sponsors for making the show possible and helping fund the work that we're doing. First, we have Our Father Constructors and Associates, your church-related project manager. Go to ourfather.us to learn more and tell them that we sent you. And secondly, not really a sponsor, I guess, so to speak, but it's us, Catholic Founders. Join the Catholic Founders Guild. Come on, guys. What are you waiting for? We are growing the biggest network of Catholic business owners that the world has ever seen. If your first objective in life is genuinely, truly, to get to heaven, it's not, about making $1 million or whatever, pursue sainthood through your calling to be an entrepreneur and join the Guild today. It's $100 a year or $10 a month, so anybody can afford it. There is no minimum revenue requirement, just commitment to your faith and commitment to answering your calling to be an entrepreneur, to be a co-creator. Go to join.catholicfounders.com to learn more and to join today. All right, without any further delay, let's get into the episode. All right, welcome to the pod, Eamonn. How you doing?
Doing all right, Silas. Thanks.
Good. I appreciate you coming on, man. And by the way, did I pronounce your name properly? Because I've just been saying it in my head, and I don't think I've ever actually asked you to clarify it. So, anyways, man. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're going to talk about some of this project, this venture you've got. But just give us a quick intro before we get too far into it. Like, who are you? Where are you based out of? And what are you building?
So, I'm an American lay student in Rome, based in Rome, more or less in Rome. Nearby, at least. I've been here in Italy for about 10 years, just getting theological degrees, now finishing a doctorate in moral theology, writing on Pius XI's social teaching. And I like to have, a lot of irons in the fire, and one of those things has increasingly been building companies or helping grow companies in mission territories. So that's kind of what I've been focused on for a little bit, in addition to academic work.
Yeah. How did you end up getting interested in this? Because if I understand correctly, you've been out there for quite some time now in the Rome area, correct?
Yeah, I've been here coming up on 10 years. And if you have like a seminarian friend who studies in Rome, the system here is that people live in one place and then they go to a university. So a seminary is here usually called a college. So there's, a lot of national colleges, as you can imagine. There's the French college, the Filipino college, whatever. There are also religious houses that take in other people that are not necessarily belonging to their own institution. So I've lived in a couple of those. I lived in a few different general houses for major religious orders, and then another house that was run by the Dominicans that was just an international college. Right? It's mostly priests. And so I got to know a lot of priests from crazy places all over the world. And that's sort of how I got involved, or at least interested in helping people in the missions as well. I have a priest friend from this crazy place. How can I support him in his work and what he's doing? Because I don't know anything about the jungle in, Kenya or Uganda or wherever, right? But he does, and I want to find a way to support what he's doing. And that was sort of the initial spark, I guess, to go down this path.
Yeah, I find cities. I haven't been to Rome, but I'm in Nashville now, and it's cities like this are kind of. They may not be places that necessarily the majority of people live, but people visit a lot. And when you have those kind of hubs that are transitory in a lot of ways, it's very interesting because you basically get exposure to a lot more people than even you would in a large city where there's maybe not that many people visiting all the time because of the nature of people passing through, and there's a certain benefit that people can lean into if they choose to, right? So I think that's interesting. We could talk about that another time, but you obviously spent. I forget how many years you said, but you spent a lot of time studying and kind of steeped in theology. How did you specifically get interested in trying to apply that to entrepreneurship and to taking that step of helping these priests that you've encountered in various interesting places in the world?
The last degree that I completed, called an STL, a license, it's like a master's. It's a church master's in theology. I wrote on socialism and basically why socialism is not the same as the virtue of charity, like the love of God. So you hear about, a lot of people will talk about, well, we just need to help the poor, and the way to do that is, large public welfare systems, take people's property away, distribute wealth, redistribute wealth, take it away from the rich, give it to the poor, kind of a Robin Hood type thing, right? And I spent 2 years studying that system, the authors and the arguments and all of this, right? And so that really showed me how much is really going on in the world of social teaching underneath the surface. It used to be very, very boring to me. I used to think, well, everything's just prudential and it's, opinions and it's just public policy and it doesn't really relate to our faith. That's not correct. I mean, there's so much going on with protology, with anthropology, with the Trinity, the fact that you have to know something in order to love it. Like that comes from the heart of God, who God is. Knowledge and love working together in a certain kind of way that gets filtered through the act of creation and imprinted in the pattern of the universe. And that matters for how you actually do anything, including build companies, including helping people, in any way, shape, or form, because you have to know what they need in order to do something actually good for them. So all of that's going on in my mind. And then, I was starting this kind of little side hustle. I wanted to sell like t-shirts and posters and this kind of thing, kind of like Catholic swag type thing. And I said, well, yeah, I want to cut a little piece of that profit because I'm going to make so much money selling t-shirts, right? This is going to be the big thing. I'm going to hit it big in the Catholic t-shirt market. I said, I want to sponsor charitable works through that. And so obviously that sort of morphed and developed and turned into one thing and another, whatever. And now I'm here a little bit more oriented towards something sensible with a little bit of experience and an interesting network that I can leverage.
Yeah. I don't want to get completely sidetracked from what your venture that we're going to talk about today, but that's a very fascinating concept that you have to know something to love it. And just like some ideas that maybe people can consider is this is partially the reason why I think AI can be dangerous is that we're summarizing things so we don't know them. And you could also even back up before the age of AI where you've got private equity firms deciding many things about employee policy or, development policy on what they're doing, building real estate projects or whatever they're building in markets where they don't know the market, they don't know the people there, they don't know the culture, and they're just reading off a list of bullet points and usually like financial related data points. So it's not possible to do something out of love for that community. And I think this is for any Catholic entrepreneur listening, consider that. Again, this is a slightly newer idea to me. I hadn't heard anybody articulate it that way. It makes sense to hear it, but if you're doing something, if you're running any sort of business, I would just encourage people to think about that. Do you know who you're serving so that you can love them in how you serve them? Do you have any more comments you want to offer there?
Yeah, I mean, like the one of the great historical examples is, in Soviet Russia and Lenin's new economic policy, which is sort of like a watered down capitalism. He said, well, the full-blown communism thing, it's not going so well. Like we need a little bit of information from the market. It's like, oh, that's a thought. And it's like you have the central committee, and I may be getting some of the details a little bit wrong, but the general idea is, You had the central committee trying to figure out prices for like 6 million different things, across this vast territory, and trying to know what everything's worth. And, you can read Hayek about how bad an idea that kind of thing is. You have to let people tell you what they want. So, it's a theme. If you understand knowing and loving and being and doing, and the relationship between those four things, you figured out the universe. It's really, really fundamental. And it comes from the procession of the Son and the Holy Spirit, from the Son and the Father. This is it. This is really, really relevant for economics.
Yeah, we might have to return to that later in this conversation. I'm kind of curious. But let's talk about this venture you've got. So we got connected through Zuzu, through Zuhair, and then he sent over this thing that you had a launch video about some Catholic pink salt. I don't know what the venture is exactly called, but just tell us a little bit about what exactly this is and kind of what's the origin of doing this, and what are you doing? Like, I want to understand what you're up to, and so people can know about it and support you, and then we can get a little bit more into the weeds of why this matters.
So I was living with, Pakistanis, in one of my houses, and I was talking with a friend who's a layman in Karachi about, having a kind of business network for Catholics in Karachi so that they could support each other. Again, because they didn't know who was a Catholic business owner in Karachi, so they couldn't figure out a way to help each other, right? They should be hiring each other's kids. They should be, trading with each other, this kind of thing, right? And, we were talking about that, and I was talking with a priest about what can we do to kind of get some economic activity, some revenue generation to support apostolic activity in Pakistan, or ministry in Pakistan. And he connected me with, another priest. And I said, Father, what can we do? He said, well, we can open a beauty salon in this little town, or, whatever. I said, well, I don't know. I don't think I can find international investors for, a beauty salon in the rural parts outside of Islamabad. I don't think that's going to work. And I said, Father, what about this salt mine, like where this pink salt comes from? He said, oh yeah, that's in my parish. It's like, well, then we're going to do that. Like, this is a famous product. Everyone knows this. Everyone loves this. So let's find a way to sell that product that is actually in your parish and try to get something out of that. So that was the start, and it took a while, but I eventually, was able to get over to Pakistan this past January. Met with a bunch of bishops, went around the slums. There's a 2-hour long documentary that's hosted on the company website right now about the visit. And yeah, just an amazing community. So many needs that are in part economically driven, part socio-religious driven. It is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. It's very, very difficult to not be a Muslim and do anything in Pakistan. And the hope and the dream is to have job creation for Catholics in Pakistan through this project. That's the dream. And then to be able to share some of that revenue with appropriate ecclesiastical projects. That's what I'm looking to do with that specific project.
Yeah. Now, is it very hard for Catholics to find employment because of the current government system?
It's extremely difficult if you are educated and want any kind of educated work. There's plenty of cleaning jobs around, and you can make pennies and be treated like the scum of the earth. Those jobs are easy enough to get, but they're really, really difficult and low-paying jobs, really, really not good work. And for the higher-paying jobs, slightly, okay income, it's like 100% who you know and how you've leveraged your network. It really doesn't matter that, you've been faithful in your last job, or that, you have a lot of degrees or whatever. It's who is able to explain to the HR department that we're hiring a Christian. Like, that's the thing, right? Because you can't hide it. It's your religious affiliation in Pakistan is on your government documents. You can't be, quiet. You can't just prudently not bring it up. They want to know, and they will know. And if they see that, your interview is likely to be canceled. So it's a very, very difficult place to get real work if you're not a Muslim.
Okay. So what you guys are doing then is, maybe explain more, because I'm not, you mentioned it's world famous, everybody loves the product. I'm actually not super familiar with this salt. So explain this. Like, is there just kind of like a region where this is found, and there happens to be a lot of Catholics in the area, so they can get their own access to this and really harvest it and package it up and sell it? Tell me more about the nuances there.
Sure. So it's affectionately nicknamed Himalayan pink salt, and it's one of the greatest marketing psyops ever. They used to call it Pakistani pink salt, apparently. and nobody bought it. And they said, well, it's near the Himalayas. We'll just call it Himalayan. And then just cha-ching, 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 because it sounds exotic. It sounds like this, fresh. You've got this image of this Sherpa, hauling down these salt, blocks or whatever. It's not like that. There's a mountain range that's just called the Salt Range. It's near the Himalayas, but it's not Himalayas. And there's just a gigantic deposit, and it's pink because there's some iron in there. There's a little bit of other trace minerals or whatever, but it's basically just salt, and it looks very beautiful. And the big benefit of it, as compared to like normal sea salt, is it's never been touched by any kind of plastics or other stuff that gets dumped into the ocean. It's been hermetically sealed for a very long time. So there's no microplastics. That's the really big, legitimate health benefit to the Himalayan pink salt. It doesn't emit ions or your people buy the lamps and this kind of thing. It's just salt. It has some iron in it, and that's it. But it does look beautiful, and there's no microplastics.
Amazing. This episode is brought to you by Our Father Constructors and Associates, a Catholic-owned construction and project management firm that represents the church's interests in building projects. If you're a pastor staring at a deferred maintenance list that just keeps growing, or your parish is trying to figure out how to fund, build, and execute a construction project that keeps the momentum going from start to finish, or perhaps you're a religious community with a property that you know could serve your mission better, but you don't know where to start, Our Father should be your first call. They are your expert construction project manager. They help you choose the right architects, design team, and contractors, protect your budget, and you will find savings in places you didn't even know existed before the project. Most importantly, they make sure the project actually serves the church's long-term mission. They've structured and managed projects from $1 to $45 million for dioceses, parishes, schools, and monasteries across the country. Check them out at ourfather.us or email Christian directly at christian@ourfather.us. That's CRISTIAN at ourfather.us. If you've got a building need, they'd be honored to help. All right, back to the show. And then, so the use case for it is not like putting it on your food, right? Like, well, what is the core use case that most people are buying it for, or is
no, most people buy it for culinary purposes. Absolutely, okay. It's just a very beautiful looking salt. There's some trace minerals. That's not what I'm doing with it to begin with. And I know you were asking a little while ago, why not do culinary salt? It's a couple different reasons that I'm choosing to try to do bath salt. And I'll give you the big secret. It's salt with magnesium sulfate. You can make it at home. It's very, very easy. If you want to go buy the ingredients, go for it. And you put it in your bath, and it like helps relax your muscles and soreness and all of that kind of thing. The reason is, first of all, there's some FDA stuff that you got to take care of to be able to sell food products like that. Even salt. It's not hard, but it's an extra barrier. And then a co-packer, the one reasonable co-packer that I could find in the US, the minimum order quantity was just so large that I was like, yeah, I can't fund 25,000 units right now at that price point. That was their minimum order quantity. And then above that, perhaps most importantly, the way that people buy something like bath salt and the margins that you can charge on bath salt, and how quickly they use it. Those are the big three things. You get a jar like this size that could be gone in 2 or 3 days, as opposed to a salt shaker that may take weeks or even months to go through. And, the margins are just gigantic. And then even the kind of person who's buying bath salt, you're buying normal salt, you go to the grocery store, it's there, you just pick it up, you say, oh, I need salt. And the kind of person who's really interested in cosmetics and beauty and spa type stuff, they're going online, and they're going to be interested also in social causes. Like that's sort of, I guess, the logic behind why I'm doing bath salt to start. So it's a combination of all of those things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Actually, somebody, I think when I reached out, I was like, man, I don't really know if I would use this, but somebody actually just told me that I should really consider doing this. I was like, I know, idea of taking a bath. Like, that wasn't that for when I was young, but maybe I got to get into this Chris Williamson vibes or something. I don't know.
Absolutely.
We'll see. But no, this is cool, man. So in general, where, just briefly before we go over, where can people go if they do want to? Is it pre-order or order? Can they already order it directly?
We're almost out of the pre-order phase. I've just got to nail down a couple, more little details for the sale phase. I have a Shopify store right now. And, maybe you can leave the link in the description. And it's expensive. It runs high. But again, we're trying to build something. And,
Yeah.
if you just want bath salts, you can make it yourself or buy it on the cheap. It's not hard, right? So the point is we're building a system and a structure to eventually give employment to Catholics in Pakistan. We want to eventually leave the manufacturing and packaging and shipping, want to leave the U.S., want to eventually take that back to Pakistan. It's going to take a while, but that's the dream, right? And then also be able to cut some of the profit off of that and send that somewhere. And I've been talking with the Dominicans in Karachi. I was at their house when I was there, and the superior is a friend of mine, and we've decided that we want to share our little bit of extra profit margins. Eventually, when it's sustainable, we want to send some of that to them. Okay, so they're our first kind of beneficiary. So support Dominican Vocations in Karachi in Pakistan, and have a nice, soothing, relaxing bath. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So.
And the way it's done right now is that basically you're just helping facilitate this and run kind of like online stores, and you'll take some amount of payment for doing that, right? But then the large amount is going to be, the profit's going to be paying the workers locally, providing those employment jobs, providing good, dignified work, and then eventually, as you can, like continuing to spit off some of those profits to support Vocations and hypothetically leverage this into doing other similar types of projects, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the proof of concept, I guess, is this product and this product line, this project. I'm just trying to show that, you can build something like this with pennies, and people just need to see, again, knowledge love. They need to see that it's a real thing, that it's really what it claims to be. They need to be able to find it. And then I think most people can see that this is a responsible way of helping a place like this, as opposed to just throwing a gift, to, some missionary priest or whatever, and hoping that it works out. Hope that school gets built. I hope that the money is spent the way that it's supposed to be spent. If I'm buying a $40 jar of bath salt, I know that some money is going somewhere, and even if it ends up, being a little bit misappropriated, well, it was like $12. It wasn't $12,000 that I decided I was going to write the big check for.
Yeah.
So it's creating jobs, it's creating wealth rather than just redistributing it. People are actually pulling something out of the ground, putting it in a box and sending it to you. You're getting something you want, and then in exchange, you're returning that, and actually increasing the wealth being given back. So it's sort of a blend of philanthropy and capitalism. It's philanthrocapitalism, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah, I like that. So now that we've gone through that, my understanding is that this is really, as you mentioned, kind of like a proof of concept, because your whole like broader goal, maybe you talk about that broadly, is you're trying to build something bigger than just this one project, right? You want to talk about that more?
Yeah, there's, to my knowledge, and I'm happy to be corrected, to my knowledge, there is no fully independent lay-run business accelerator, like a group that actually helps build things like this or helps make them bigger, specifically for Catholic social enterprises in the missions. So Catholic owned or controlled social enterprises, companies that actually are not just about the bottom line, but are also about giving back to their own community, especially in terms, in this case, of apostolic work or, Catholic hospitals or schools or whatever, and in the missions, not, domestically, not in wealthier places, but in places like Pakistan. I was in South Sudan in 2024. I'm hoping to do some stuff there. I'll be going to Papua New Guinea this September. Like places like this, that really do not have an easy on-ramp to the global market. And so, you can read the encyclicals. The popes are kind of circling around this idea, like you need to find ways to reach these people in these places who cannot get into the game. And so the idea is to build a sensible forum or platform from which wealthier people who are able to take extra risk can go to these places, with their money, and build something sustainable that over time helps create jobs, get people out of poverty, and then also can sustainably help to fund the activities of the church in those places.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I've noticed is that some people, I would say, especially in America right now, given like the fact that there's been a lot of challenges in America, and we have to kind of like focus on helping fix America. Let's put it that way right now at the moment, save the West, so to speak. I've had a lot of people say, oh, we shouldn't be focusing on doing these kind of like overseas missions and enterprises because we have to help our literal neighbor first. But your point is here that there are people who they cannot, like, it is not possible for them to have access to this. It's not as if these opportunities exist and we're just choosing to fund somebody's project in Pakistan versus helping our neighbor literally down the street. This is the case where these people actually need genuine help, and for the people, not everyone, but for the people who do have the means and the ability to help support those things, this is kind of answering part of the call that the church has for us, correct?
Absolutely, and it breaks into two categories. There's the investors or the big funders, right? Okay. This is not something to invest in if you're looking to send your kids to college or you're really saving for retirement. This is something to get involved in if you're looking at your second or third vacation house, and you're like, oh, I just have so much money, I don't know what to do with it all. It's like, well, why don't you come play a very interesting game that's meaningful, impactful, and sustainable that can really actually help save souls, right? So that's the one side of it. People may be a little bored with, helping New York City, or whatever, right? If you want to get something going that's a little bit more interesting, keeps you awake, right? Come with me to the jungle, right? On the other side is people who just want to buy stuff, and with their purchases, you actually help support these things. So it's two different groups that are really relevant here. The big check writers, this is one side, and then the people who just say, yeah, I want to buy bath salt and I'm willing to spend an extra $10, So it's true, we should help the people who are closest to us, as a general rule, but there's more to it than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to understand, remind me to come back to the point about the excess capital. I'd like to talk about that later, but with this, I kind of like, let's call it social Accelerator for social enterprises. What do you, in your mind, think are the core pillars that are necessary to make this happen on a much larger scale? And then again, I'm assuming it doesn't. You're not probably thinking it has to be me doing all these things. But what are the core pillars that are required to really make this happen, so that we can find many other, similar examples to the one that you've mentioned with Karachi, right? What are the things that need to be in place so that we can start to scale these and do them more often?
Yeah, the first thing, and I guess the most fundamental thing, is a network. I have a very good clerical network, a network of priest friends who are all over, right? I sort of have that, down, but it needs to increase, and there needs to be a certain level of trust that's there in that network. It's not the sort of thing where I would be very comfortable working with people who I, met one time at a networking event. If I'm going to put my life in your hands and you're going to take me into the jungle, or you're going to take me to Somalia, or wherever, I want to have a certain kind of network. And a lot of these guys I've lived with, I lived night and day under the same roof. So there's a certain kind of trust there. And the other thing is funding, and I do need funding. This is not simply a for-profit, but it's not a non-profit either. It's really straddling the two. In terms of tax realities, it's currently a for-profit, but I recently discovered this very interesting model called fiscal sponsorship, which essentially allows someone to give a gift to a company that is tax deductible. So I'm pursuing that model. I have a partner who's kind of agreed to take on the company. Profide LLC is the name of the company. And that's a very important pillar, is the ability for people to make a gift and actually, get a tax break for it, rather than just giving a gift to an LLC, which I have had happen. People have done that for me, but it's not as attractive as getting a tax break.
Yeah. It's very silly to me. I mean, maybe I'm just not wealthy enough yet, but the fact that people like really need that tax break. It's like, I understand that you want that benefit, but like if it's a good thing, just do it anyways, right? Like I'm generally not in favor of the nonprofit machine. I guess you could say it slightly politely. I think there's a lot of things that we could fix about that. But so you said network and funding, and what else? What else is required?
Yeah, a team, a talented team that actually really understands certain things about trade, about culture, about money, moving money around. I mean, you try sending money to South Sudan, it's not easy, and it can introduce a lot of liabilities. If you're conducting trade in some of these places, it's not easy, and that is not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is, big, broad, concepts, theology, moral theology, the idea, and I'm willing to go to these places, but I don't know about shipping and tax structures and international law. So those would be the three things I think that I really need is local partners, a good local network of partners, funding, and then an appropriate team to help make sure that things are together.
Yeah. And my guess would be that once you've kind of proven the concept, so to speak, with this venture, that you could hypothetically then just leverage your network to identify, let's say, 2 or 3 other opportunities and pick one and then continue to go after it. And most likely, if it's working well and people are motivated and know about it, you could probably, with, I'm assuming, not necessarily that much capital, get the next one started, right? Like, do you have an idea of like, hey, typically we'll need $100,000 or $200,000 to get the next one started, or is it more in the millions?
No, it's quite low, and I know the next thing that I'm going to be getting involved with. It's out in the Pacific. I'm heading out to the Pacific in September, October, and yeah, I mean even like $20,000, $30,000 would really pour fuel on the fire. It's just the positioning, and it's the kind of thing where too much money may even be bad, because it can get a little messed up. If you dump too much money into something too quickly, well, it gets wasted or it gets misallocated or strange things happen. So for now, I almost prefer to be a little bit scrappier, and show that like I can really operate and we can do this together as a team, and we don't need all that much in terms of funding. We need enough for plane tickets, we need enough for whatever insurance we need, and then a little bit of extra, capital to grow things.
Quick question for all the Catholic business owners listening. Are you running your business, or is your business running you through all of the admin tasks that you're doing on a regular basis? We see so many founders doing repeatable administrative tasks, and that's why we started Paraclete VA. We bridge the gap by connecting you with high-quality, Catholic, and vetted virtual assistants from all around the world who come from our existing network so that we know we can trust them. And so can you. Many of our Catholic Founders Guild members have hired through this service and are using this to offload their finance, marketing, administrative, and other busy work so that they can focus on what really matters and growing their business. It's the stuff that needs to get done but shouldn't be done by you. The cost is simple. Pay $500 on the day the candidate starts and $500 if you're still happy with them after 30 days. Most hires take less than 10 days to fill. Just email admin@catholicfounders.com with a little bit about what you're looking for. We'll send you some candidates, you do some interviews. Most of the time, you'll have your hire in under 10 days, and this way you can start focusing on what really matters. Stop doing the busy work and start moving the needle. Yeah, that's a pretty interesting concept broadly, not even just in this particular instance, but when you have, I can speak for myself, right? We had a really good Q1, and then the Q2 has been terrible for us. And I think that part of it is because I got complacent with like Q1 was just so great. There's extra money in the bank, and then you start to get a little bit loose with, oh yeah, I'll try this like new product or new service that I don't really need, and you just become less scrappy, like you said, right? So it's even the people who are maybe not even operating these kind of like social enterprises, right? Like myself, and I'm somebody who's listened to a lot of content about how important it is to control your costs, and I still like fell for being too loose, right? So I think this is something we can all consider. So no, I like that a lot. Right. I think this is great. I really
can also be dangerous. Like I was in the jungle in South Sudan, and I learned that an average monthly income for someone living in a grass hut in the jungle in South Sudan, it's where I was, $5 a month approximately. And that's kind of a normal amount of income. If you gave someone in that kind of a place, you gave them like a check. If you gave them $50,000, that's dangerous, because now everyone knows, hey, they've got money, and all their friends are suddenly lying to them. They don't know who to trust. People are, maybe gonna, extort them. They're gonna, kill them. They're gonna steal from them. They're gonna do whatever, because they know that that's where money is. Like not just a little bit, but a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of considerations to make when you're introducing or injecting a lot of wealth into some of these places. Really can reorient an entire village or city or whatever. So it's got to be done very responsibly, very carefully, even a little slowly. So Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I mean, if you look at all the NGO money going into different countries, you see
exactly.
this exact issue. My wife is from Uganda, and just like the stories of how like this money basically completely goes to waste because it's primarily just being skimmed off by so-called leadership, right? But that's very interesting. It goes to the principle of subsidiarity, right? You have to do it with people locally who understand the nuances, right? And that way
Exactly.
it's actually being used properly, which is typically not the case when people are doing these large donations. That's why I think generally many people are so against this just like blank check NGO money going into other countries, right? Because it just doesn't really result in positive things. In fact, it probably results in more negative things most of the time.
Yeah, it
But
destroys incentives, and that's why it destroys good incentives to to work to create something, and it creates other incentives, right? Political incentives. It creates corruption. So the entire conversation swirls around who's controlling the foreign money that's coming in, and how are they getting to that position, and then what do they do with it? What favor can I get out of this person who controls the foreign aid? So yeah, it's really an industry in and of itself, and then the overhead costs can be so enormous. My overhead costs for this right now are basically zero. I have a website and a Shopify store. That's about it. That's like the overhead costs, right? So being lean and mean, that's the name of the game, I think, for something like this.
yeah, I like that a lot. I think this is the case for a lot of people. Or how they should probably consider operating, right? There's a lot we could say about that, but I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. I want to go back to this concept. Well, there's a couple things I want to call it. So number one, I think it's very fascinating. I know when we first talked and I met you, I was like, trying to figure out what is the unique thing that you bring to the table, right? And I think that you have this network that you in some ways never intended to build. It just kind of has happened.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, some people, if you don't mind me sharing, like you're sometimes frustrated at, hey, what exactly is God trying to call me to? And it's almost as though you had to go through that wandering period, that desert period of like you're doing so much, you're in the study like phase of your life, right? But as a result, you've actually built up this network that now makes you very uniquely qualified, probably one of maybe a dozen people that hypothetically have such a network that you can then bring to the table and do something unique. And I think this is challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs to be patient with the time. I've talked to people recently where they're like, man, I feel like such a visionary, but am I just a visionary who doesn't deserve to have success because I haven't, I haven't made $1 million or whatever it is. And I think that there's this element of patience that we all have to recognize that God is specifically guiding us. And as long as we're trying our best and doing our best and, putting things in the right order, God first, and then, our vocation and then our career, that he will guide us to where he wants us to be. And in some cases that may not ever be making $1 million, right? It may not be hitting that level of success because maybe it's uniquely best for your soul. Or maybe keeping you more grounded was really beneficial for the people around you and not actually yourself, right? There's so many things that we don't know. There's a whole veil we can't see behind. I just want to encourage other people to look at your example and say, you've been doing this studying for so long. You didn't really know exactly where this was all leading, but now you find yourself in this position where you can make an impact and you can do something very, very, very helpful. But
Yeah,
you had to
I
endure
wanted to
that
come to
desert.
Rome for 2 years. That was the plan, right? And here I am. It's 10 years now. So definitely was not the plan, but it has been good. It's
Yeah.
created something in me which I can use for others. It's been formation. It's been formation.
Yeah. And this is the another thing too is the unique. I just really encourage people to try to figure out what exactly is their unique calling based on the circumstances they find themselves in, because you can't manufacture new circumstances necessarily. There's certain things you can do, but you could move to a new city, but you're not going to know anybody immediately, right? And I talk to a lot of people who their family owns a business and they're thinking about entrepreneurship because their dad was a business owner. And I'm like, well, what about taking over your dad's business? And they're like, oh, no, I wouldn't want to do that. I was like, hey, man, you grew up working for him. Maybe you should consider that, right? And some people just they find it too uncomfortable to approach these things, but that is a very unique thing that only they have. Literally, like you are the son of this person. They probably only have a few other sons potentially. You are very uniquely set up to take over this business potentially, right? So just I encourage people listening again beyond this particular project you're doing, like just think about your own circumstances. What are you called to do? So
And yeah, and even just a lot of people with the issue of discernment, not to go on to a large theological tangent, they're waiting for like a feeling, like in prayer, and maybe you get that, and maybe that's the voice of God, but I think the normal thing that you should do is just look at your life and say what makes sense.
yeah.
That's probably the will of God. Do that.
He gave us an intellect for a reason, right? I like that. So let's go back to this one topic of the people who have, excess income, that you said, I think your example is they're buying their second or third vacation home and they've got money to potentially put towards something that may or may not, have high likelihood of succeeding, right? I just want to get your general perspective on, especially having studied theology a lot and now being super involved in entrepreneurship. What do you think what are the potential uses for somebody with excess income? And should we be focused primarily on, saving for retirement, or making sure we're making very sound investments? Or if we have more money than we need at this present moment, what should we be doing with that? Should we be focusing on getting the highest ROI so we can eventually donate a lot of money to the church? Should we give it to people who are in need right now? Do you have general perspectives on the kind of pathways to do this or to think about this?
Well, you should give it all to me in what I'm doing. No, you should not. I mean, obviously, it's going to depend on the person and their circumstances, like we just talked about, right? Definitely, provide for your children's future. Don't leave them with nothing, right? If you've earned the right to enjoy yourself, okay, fine, do that. But then look for needs that no one else is looking for. Try to find things that really need getting done, and then just go do them. And maybe it's expensive, maybe it's difficult, but there's a whole virtue called magnificence that's about exactly that. So try to be magnificent. Look at the great works that need to be done, that are going to endure, not some vanity project. I want a statue of my uncle. My uncle was so important. Come on, Does your town that you grew up in need a library? Like, is that the kind of thing that they need? If so, well, maybe you should anchor that project. You should say, hey, I'm going to put down the $1.5 million to start to get this done. And then I'm going to have, some friends help out with the rest. This is the kind of thing that you should look for. Go be proactive and find projects that are meaningful to you, rather than just having, the masses of, people come up to you saying, will you help me with this? Will you help me with that? Go find something that's really meaningful to you, because then you're going to be driven enough to actually see it through well. That's the virtue of magnificence. Okay.
Yeah.
That love, that meaning towards the impact, that's going to help you, right? If it's not meaningful, if you're just trying to get rid of someone who's been asking you for a handout, that's not as easy to do well. Go find something meaningful and impactful long term, and then get involved with that.
Can you say more about that? I'm not super familiar with this concept necessarily. I was just recalling we had Federico on the podcast a long time ago, and he talked about magnificence a little bit, but I'm not super well versed on this. Like, is there, you mentioned some component about love of the project. Can you just explain more? I'd like to dig into
Sure. If you want to do difficult things, you have to really love the thing that you're working towards, right? And the need increases with the difficulty of the project. So, if you want to buy lunch, that's not so hard. But if you want to build a school in the jungle, that's difficult. That could take years. There's going to be a lot of setbacks. There's going to be a lot of, problems, a lot of challenges. There's going to be a lot of work. So if you're not very invested in getting that done, it's probably not going to work out, especially if you're the anchor. You're the one that everyone is rallying around, and you have the money to get things moving. So it requires a kind of perseverance and patience. And that's only going to work if you really, really want the thing that you're working towards.
Mm-hmm. So is the virtue then can you explain maybe more clearly for me, the virtue itself, is that to do something that is grand, that is long-term with
specifically with large amounts of wealth. It's the moderate use of large amounts of wealth towards, producing something, right? As opposed to munificence, like, I'm not really going to spend very much, or just waste, I'm just going to spend and spend and spend and spend. No, it's the middle, where I am going to spend a large amount of money and struggle to see it through correctly. This is not easy to do. Typically people either, don't spend enough, or they just, have these silly vanity projects, and, they just pour all this wealth in, and it's wasteful. So the middle is actually quite challenging.
Interesting.
And you can only really have it and act if you're wealthy. So if you're a very wealthy person, this is a virtue for you. Specifically, your kind of person can have and needs to exercise this virtue. If you're just sitting on your money, you're doing something wrong. That's sort of the upshot of it.
Interesting. It's fascinating to consider that people can only practice the virtue once they have that kind of circumstance in life. We should really do a deeper dive on this at some point. This is quite interesting. I appreciate you breaking that down a little bit. There's a lot of value we're getting out of your many years of theological study. I want to ask one last kind of larger question before we go on to rapid fire and then wrap up is, having spent so much time studying theology, what are some of the core takeaways that you, as a very theologically trained person, I guess you could say, think about entrepreneurship as a whole? What are some of the things that really stand out to you as the core pillars, or just the most interesting things to contemplate or to consider or to mention to somebody else who may not have thought about these?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're trying to recreate Eden in a responsible way by being an entrepreneur, right? We're trying to not be, the foreman at the factory that Marx is complaining about, somewhat justifiably, just turning people into machines that are replaceable. And we're not living off the glut of capitalism that he predicted would happen, and of course it did not. We're in the middle. We're trying to create things, trying to pull things out of the ground in a meaningful way, that provides value to people. So the contrast with Eden is very interesting. We could talk about that probably quite a long time. The other thing, and it's something that's really, really striking about what money is and how it relates to the Evangelical Counsel of Poverty. Money is a means by which you can subject yourself to other people's self-interest however you want, right? And the relationship between money and obedience and poverty is very interesting. I will be obedient to, the abbots for the sake of my own sanctification and for the good of the monastery and the church and the world. And I will be poor in order to free myself from any other temporal concerns. Things will just be provided for me. Again, a foil with Eden. And then another, I suppose, consequence of the reality of money, which comes after the fall, is voluntary poverty is a great help to holiness. Involuntary poverty is not. It's the opposite. I mean, people who are striving and struggling to get more money, even if they're actually wealthy, but they see themselves as poor, they're very distracted. They can't think straight. They can't really pray well, right? And then the people at the bottom, they're wondering, how am I going to eat tomorrow? Where am I going to sleep? How am I going to live? How am I going to take care of my children, right? They can't hardly pray, right? And this is one of the big motivators for me with this kind of work that I do. I want to free them of their temporal anxieties so that they can elevate themselves towards, contemplation, prayer, the sacraments, okay? As well as freeing clergy from worrying about the temporal needs of the laity who are subject to them, and so that they can worry about preaching and teaching and the administration of the sacraments. It's about freedom.
A Catholic founder is somebody who recognizes that they are called to be an instrument of God's will in the world. We're not building a business for our own sake. We are simply stewards. If that describes how you think about entrepreneurship, we want you in the Catholic Founders Guild. We're growing an association of Catholic business owners who believe in these things deeply so that we can invest in, buy from, and support one another. We do this through our exclusive membership directory, monthly group calls, and our group chat. But there's a lot more to it than that. The Guild has a lot to offer. The cost is only $10 a month or $100 a year. So if you believe that you were created to create, join the Catholic Founders Guild today. You can do so by going to catholicfounders.com/subscribe and upgrade to any paid subscription. See you in the Guild. This is very fascinating. I was just having a discussion with somebody over email about wealth, and he referenced, I think it was Sirach. There was a scripture about you don't want to give away your money so that you become subject to other people, or so that your children would be begging. And it's interesting to consider that. I haven't really thought about this from on the podcast, which is surprising. I appreciate you bringing it up, but we need to have that base level of kind of needs being met, whether that is individually or as a family or as a parish, priest, for example, because when you don't, then you are beholden to doing certain things in order to obtain the money. And I think that the people who I've encountered who tend to be very poo-pooing the idea of trying to grow wealth and grow income so that you can benefit those around you are the ones who oftentimes are pretty well off. Like they're taken care of, maybe middle class, and their needs are met, so that to them it's crazy. But when they don't have a true connection to people who were raised in real poverty, where you are like struggling just to stretch $100 to make it last for the week for your family, right? Or you're on food stamps, right? And I think that it's something we should all become more aware of and realize. I think this, in the same way that the church has a lot of, not the church, but the laity has a lot of catching up to do and recalling and remembering our faith. There's a lot of things we should be doing to understand the nuances of some of these virtues that you've brought up today. So I appreciate that perspective, man. That's really good. Just to re-summarize it from my own brain here, is like, we don't want to be beholden to money, whether that is not having any of it so that we have to only worry about that and oftentimes forget about our spiritual situation. And on the other hand, if you have a lot of it, but yet you still have these limiting beliefs, if you will, to use a more modern term, you still think you're poor. Maybe you're a billionaire who's like, you're pinching pennies for everything because you think, you grew up in poverty and you're still afraid of it, right? That's also not good. So I like that a lot, man. Thank you for sharing that. So let's wrap up here with some rapid fire, and then we'll go from there. And I think we should probably have you on again, but we should not note down a few of these other topics that you've brought up and maybe go a little bit deeper in some of them, because you've got a lot of wisdom to share. So I appreciate this, man. So let's first. Are there any specific scriptures that really kind of stand out to you or inspire you from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
Yeah, St. Paul talking about being all things to all men, that comes to mind. If you need someone to help you with logging in Central Africa, I'm here for it. If you need someone to help you with a spice farm in Papua New Guinea, I'm here for it, and on and on and on. Again, for the sake of freeing people for contemplation and prayer.
Mm-hmm. Which letter of St. Paul is that?
Gosh, you're putting me on the spot. I want to say it's to the Romans. Don't quote me on that. Yeah,
we'll have Oscar.
Pulling that out of my deep memory here.
We'll have Oscar look it up in the background. And then, who is an entrepreneur that really inspires you and why?
Who's an entrepreneur that inspires me and why? Gosh, I'll have to think about this.
Got to go with your gut reaction.
My gut reaction. No, man. Yeah, I'm gonna say my friend Zuzu. He's awesome. I don't know why. Just incredible human being, and definitely wowed by how quickly he's been growing his stuff. It's been cool to watch that, and the humility. It's especially his humility. Like, he'll say, "I don't know what I'm doing," and that's when you know that someone is really worth betting on. If they can say, "I don't know this and I don't know that and I'm not sure about this," it's when people start saying, "No, I've been doing this for so long. I'm the best. Everyone acknowledges me as being superior." Those are the people who are really dangerous. If someone says, "I don't know what I'm doing," then they're probably trustworthy when they say that they do.
Yeah, I like that. And by the way, Oscar looked it up. It's 1 Corinthians 9:22.
Dang it! That was my backup.
Nice. And then, who is one of your favorite saints and why?
One of my favorite saints, I would say Saint Anthony Claret, who has an entrepreneurial mind and is relatively unknown. Also a missionary bishop, right? Basically invented what we now call Catholic press. Okay, and it was just a miracle factory. Definitely worth reading his autobiography and then the biography together. You got to read both.
What do you know? What era he was? What age? What years?
Yeah, he was at Vatican I.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Got it. That's awesome. I'll have to check that out. And then, what is one of your favorite devotions?
The Rosary. I pray the Rosary every day. And I'll put in a shameless plug here. Our bath salts all going to be named after Marian devotions, and the first one is Lepanto. So there's a little theme there with the Battle of Lepanto and the Islamic element.
Yeah.
So Dominicans as well. We're helping Dominicans. So anyway,
that's actually very clever. Out of curiosity, do you have any particular tips on how to pray the Rosary better? Because I grew up saying it, but I find that there's many periods of time where we still say it pretty much every day as a family, but it's sometimes just kind of like, we're saying it while we're cleaning because, we've got kids, and it's like we're just trying to make sure we get it in. Are there any particular pieces of advice that you have?
I think an image that's very striking about how to pray the Rosary badly is putting dead flowers at a Marian altar. It's like, well, yeah, I put this little flower here, but it's shriveled and it's died, but I did put the flower there. And so that's an image that really kind of, comes back to me and helps me make sure that each flower, each little bead that I'm praying, is a living flower, attentive and intentional. So
yeah, I like that. That's definitely a particular challenge I'll have to lean into. But I appreciate you coming on, man. Last thing, what is the website where people can go to learn more about what you guys are doing? If they want to order things, we'll obviously link it below, but just in case people are just listening.
Profide.io, Profide.io.
Amazing.
I didn't spring for the .com, so
too much, right?
Yeah.
I forget the country that has the IO and the AI, but there's
the Indian Ocean. It's the Indian Ocean.
I know that they're raking
There's like
in
4
revenue from
websites that are actually based there.
Yeah, a lot of people raking in money from that, or a lot of people spending money there. So, anyways, this is a pleasure, man. I appreciate you coming on, and I definitely mean it when I say I like to have you back on to talk about more of these things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Silas. It was a pleasure.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. First of all, I do want to ask, if you are somebody who uses bath salts or might be interested in trying some, go check out what Eamonn is doing by Googling Lepanto Fitness Bath Salt. This will help you find the link. The actual link is too hard to spell. I'll put it in the description so you can go buy it. But if you Google Lepanto Fitness Bath Salt, I'm pretty sure you'll find a shop link to go find it. Secondly, the way that Eamonn is helping these Catholics who are living in persecuted areas is very interesting. And I want you to consider, how could you do this? And I'm not talking about doing exactly what he's doing with, faraway Catholics as in this circumstances, but in your own neighborhood, right? You and your neighborhood may not be under, active, under threat persecution. Obviously there's some persecution probably going on subtly, but you may not be under active persecution, but you can help your neighbor out. Do you view your business as a way to make an impact? And perhaps an impact on your employees, your street, your parish, your neighborhood, your state, or your country, right, at large. And all that happens first by starting with the locals. But the point of business is a lot more than making money. That's what we're trying to get at. The point of business is about a lot more than just making money. There's people that you impact through the process. So just consider, what is he doing, and is there a way that you could imitate that type of activity and behavior in how you run your own business. One more big shout out to our sponsors, Our Father Constructors and Associates. If you're building a church project or involved with one, maybe funding it, whether that's a remodel, building a school, a monastery, whatever, reach out to Our Father Constructors and Associates to help you with that. You can do so by going to ourfather.us. That's ourfather.us. And if you like what we're up to, I am once again asking, like the Bernie Sanders meme, to consider joining the Catholic Founders Guild. We are doing a lot of things, but our primary objective is to transform the world and to make it Catholic through entrepreneurship. We are well on our way to growing the largest network of Catholic business owners in the world, and it's only $100 a year or $10 a month to join this. You can surround yourself with Catholic business owners whose primary objective above everything else is to get to heaven. To learn more and to join, you can go to join.catholicfounders.com. That's join.catholicfounders.com. And if you do enjoy this content and you're not willing to join, at least do us a favor and share this around. Go subscribe to us on YouTube. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcasting player. If you do listen on podcasts, leave us a review. It really helps. And just share it with somebody else who you think would really enjoy what we're up to. There's a lot of different things we've done. There's a lot of really good guests who have come on and spent their time with us. Take advantage of that. Learn from them. There is so much that you can learn from these people. They have given us their time. Take advantage of it. It's there for free. We make all the content free. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. God bless you. And do not forget that you were created to create.